Hey everyone, welcome back. This one starts with a wedding 3 weeks away, a baby that exposed a year-long lie, and a fiancé who thought therapy could hide everything. Hit like, subscribe, and let's begin. My fiancé spent the entire year we were rebuilding trust in couples therapy, still sleeping with the woman he'd called a one-time mistake. Her son was born 3 weeks before our wedding. I'm a labor and delivery nurse. I catch babies for a living. 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, in a hospital on the north side of Columbus, Ohio. I have stood in more rooms on the worst and best night of people's lives than I could ever count. I know what fear looks like on a monitor. I know the exact face a man makes when he's lying to a woman who's in too much pain to call him on it. I see that face at work all the time. I just didn't see it at home. For 4 years, I didn't see it. So before you decide what kind of woman misses something this big, yeah, I'm that woman. I caught everybody's truth, but my own. Let me back up, because this isn't a story about one bad night. I wish it were. A one-time mistake I could maybe live with. What I couldn't live with was everything underneath it. His name is Adam. He's 44, I'm 34. We'd been together 4 years, engaged for 1, and we have a daughter together, Nora, who's 6 and draws pictures of our family holding hands. 3 stick figures with enormous round heads, me always in the middle. Adam sells commercial real estate, office parks, strip centers, that kind of thing. It's a job with a lot of dinners, a lot of, I've got a client thing, don't wait up. I used to think that was the price of the life we had. The good school district, the house with the finished basement, the ring. Here's the thing about Adam that everybody always said. He's a good guy. Coaches Nora's soccer, remembers your birthday, carries the heavy stuff in from your car without being asked. My own mother loved him more than she loved most of her actual relatives. When we got engaged, she cried harder than I did. "You found one of the good ones," she kept saying. "Do you know how rare that is at our age?" I believed it too. That's the part I can't undo. I wasn't tricked by a monster. I was tricked by a man everyone agreed was kind, which is a much better disguise. We met when Nora wasn't even a thought yet. I was 30, burned out from a bad relationship, picking up overtime so I didn't have to be in my apartment. He came into the coffee shop near the hospital in scrubs of his own. No, that's a lie. He was in a suit. I'm doing the thing where I make it sound like fate. He was just a guy in a suit who held the door and then bought my coffee and then, somehow, 2 weeks later, was making me dinner. He cooked. That was his whole opening move. A man our age who could roast a chicken and ask you actual questions about your day. I didn't stand a chance. Within a year, I was pregnant with Nora, which neither of us planned and both of us wanted by the time she arrived. He was in the delivery room. I remember thinking, of all the rooms I've worked, this is the only one I've ever been the patient in. And he held my hand the entire time and didn't pass out, and told me I was the strongest person he'd ever met. I believed that too. So that's the picture. 4 years, a daughter, a ring, a wedding 11 weeks out, a venue downtown with a deposit we couldn't get back, my mother's dress already hemmed and hanging in her spare closet, in a garment bag she unzipped to show people who came over. That's the picture he set on fire. And the worst part, the part I keep coming back to at 3 in the morning, is that I handed him the matches and the gasoline. And I thanked him for being so transparent about it. I need to tell you about last year first, because that's where the rot started, even though I didn't smell it until 3 weeks ago. It was March, a little over a year ago. Adam had been weird for maybe a month. Short, distracted, his phone face down at dinner, which he never used to do. I told myself it was work. Commercial real estate had been slow, deals falling through, and he carried that stuff home in his shoulders. I'm a nurse. I'm trained to look at someone and decide if they're okay. I looked at my own fiancé, and I decided he was just tired. Write me off as stupid if you want. I deserve it. Then one night he came home and he didn't eat. Adam always eats. The man could eat a full dinner after a steak dinner. He sat down at our kitchen table and he put his hands flat on the wood, like he was bracing for turbulence, and he said, "I have to tell you something, and you're going to hate me." I'll be honest, for a second, I thought he was sick. That's where my brain went first. Cancer. I actually thought, please don't let it be his pancreas, because at the hospital, pancreas is the word nobody wants. That's how far I was from the truth. I was scared he was dying. I was not scared he was cheating, because cheating was something other people's husbands did, men who weren't one of the good ones. He told me he'd slept with his ex, a woman named Brittany, someone he dated before he ever met me, years back, before Nora, before any of it. He said they'd run into each other, a work thing, a happy hour, somebody's going away party. The details kept sliding around when he talked, which I noticed and immediately unnoticed because I didn't want to be a person who noticed. He said it was one night, one stupid, drunk, meaningless night, and he'd been sick about it ever since, and he couldn't live with himself, and he had to tell me because he loved me, and he didn't want our marriage to start on a lie. He cried, real crying, the ugly kind, snot and everything. And then he did the thing that I now understand was the most calculated move of his entire life. He took out his phone, unlocked it, and slid it across the table to me. "Look at everything," he said. "I have nothing to hide. Go through all of it. Texts, photos, whatever you need. I'm not going to be a man who has a phone you can't touch." And I didn't look. I want you to sit with that because I've had to. He pushed the phone across the table and I pushed it back. I said, "I don't want to read it." I told myself it was strength, grace. I told myself that going through his phone would mean I was choosing to live in the worst night instead of moving past it. I was so proud of myself for not looking. I thought I was being the bigger person. Here's what I know now that I didn't know then. He slid me a phone he had already cleaned. He'd had time. He confessed on his schedule, not because he got caught. And a man who confesses on his own schedule has had every chance in the world to decide exactly what you'll find if you go looking. The nothing to hide was theater. He knew me well enough to know I wouldn't take the phone. He bet 4 years of knowing me on it. He won. We didn't sleep that night. We sat up and we talked until the windows went gray. And somewhere in there, I decided, out loud, to him, holding his hand across the same table, that I wasn't going to throw away our whole life over one drunk mistake he'd been brave enough to confess. Brave. That's the word I used. I called him brave. The next morning, I went to work and I caught 2 babies before lunch and I cried in the supply closet between them, and a younger nurse named Priya found me and didn't ask, just handed me a juice box from the patient fridge and sat with me until my hands stopped shaking. I told her my grandmother was sick. I lied to the one person who showed up for me because the truth felt too humiliating to say in a building where I was supposed to be the competent one. We started counseling 2 weeks later. A woman named Dr. Reyes, an office with a sound machine outside the door, and a box of tissues placed on every available surface, like a hint. Adam came to every session. He was, and I mean this, a model patient. He used the words accountability, rebuilding. I broke trust and I have to earn it back. Dr. Reyes would nod and write something down, and I'd sit there thinking, see, he's doing the work. This is what doing the work looks like. I didn't know yet that a man can perform the work of being sorry better than he ever performed being faithful. That sorry, for some people, is just another deal to close. Adam sold buildings for a living. He knew how to make you feel like you were the one who decided to sign. For 8 months, we rebuilt. Or I rebuilt, and he supervised. And I told myself the foundation was solid again. Right up until the day it turned out he'd been pouring it over a sinkhole the whole time. The 8 months after the confession were the strangest of my life, because on paper, they were good. Better than good. Adam came home earlier. He put his phone in a basket by the door. His idea, he made a whole speech about it, so that the evenings were ours. He planned a weekend in Hocking Hills, a cabin, the two of us, Nora at my mom's. He proposed all over again on a hiking trail, down on one knee in the mud, even though we were already engaged, because he said the first ring came before he understood what he had, and he wanted to ask me as the man he was trying to become. People cry at stuff like that. I cried at stuff like that. And still, here's the thing I never told Dr. Reyes, never told my mother, barely told myself. My gut never came all the way back. There was a half second every time he kissed my forehead, every time he said I love you into the back of my neck, where some animal part of me went quiet and watchful. The way you go quiet in a patient's room when the numbers look fine, but something about the breathing is wrong. I'd push it down. I'd call it trauma, call it my own broken trust, my problem to fix, not evidence of his. That's the trick they get you with. They cheat, and then your suspicion becomes the thing you have to apologize for. We set the wedding date, spring, a venue downtown with big windows and a deposit that ate a chunk of our savings. My mother took me dress shopping, and I said yes to a dress in front of her and my sister Dana and a saleswoman who clapped, and my mom had it shipped to her house and hemmed by a woman at her church and hung in her spare closet in a long white garment bag. She'd unzip it for anybody. The mailman, practically. Look what my daughter's wearing. Can you believe it? After everything. She didn't know what everything was. She thought she did. Then, in the fall, Adam started getting weird again. I knew the shape of it this time. The face-down phone. Not in the basket anymore. The basket had quietly stopped being a thing. The longer dinners. The shower the second he walked in the door, which is a small thing that is never a small thing. I felt the watchfulness come up out of my stomach again, and this time I hated myself for it. Because we'd done the work. We'd done 8 months of work. And here I was being the suspicious wreck Dr. Reyes and I had spent so long talking me out of being. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be that woman. God, the things I did to avoid being that woman. It came out in November, and it didn't come out from him. It came out from Brittany. She called the house, our actual landline, which we only kept because it came bundled with the internet and my mother refused to learn my cell number. I almost didn't pick up. I thought it was a robocall about the car's extended warranty. Instead, it was a woman's voice, careful and flat, asking for Adam. And when I said he wasn't home, who's calling? There was this pause, a long one. The kind of pause I know from work. The pause right before somebody tells you something that's going to change your week. "This is Brittany," she said. "I think we need to talk. I'm guessing you don't know." I knew the name. Of course I knew the name. The one night, a year before, had a name, and the name was Brittany. I stood in my own kitchen with the cordless phone. Who has a cordless phone? I have a cordless phone. And I said, "No what?" And she told me she was pregnant, that she was almost 5 months along, that it was Adam's. that there was no question whose it was, and that she'd assumed I knew because Adam had told her, weeks ago, that he'd already told me everything, and that he and I were basically done anyway. Basically done anyway. I remember the linoleum. I remember looking down at the kitchen floor, at this one curled-up corner of linoleum by the dishwasher that Adam kept saying he'd fix, and thinking, with total calm, the way you think in a code when everyone else is panicking, he told her we were done. We are not done. We are 20-some weeks from a wedding I have a dress for? The one night was 5 months pregnant. Do the math the way I did it standing on that linoleum. 5 months pregnant in November means she conceived in spring. The one drunk night he confessed to in March wasn't a closed door. It was a window he'd left open and kept climbing back through. He confessed to the part he thought I might find and buried the part that was still happening. I didn't scream at Brittany. People expect me to say I screamed. I didn't. I asked her in my flat work voice, the voice I use when a delivery is going sideways and panicking would kill someone, "How far along? When's your due date? Are you taking care of yourself?" I asked a pregnant stranger if she was taking her prenatal vitamins. Because that's who I am, I guess. That's the broken little reflex at the center of me. Somebody's pregnant, I want to know if they're okay, even if the somebody is the proof my entire life is a lie. She started crying. She said she was sorry. She said she really did think I knew. She said Adam kept telling her one thing and apparently telling me another, and she was tired of being a secret with a due date. We talked for maybe 10 minutes. 2 women on 2 ends of a phone line, both of us lied to in opposite directions. Neither of us the one who did the lying. I didn't know it yet, but that 10-minute call was the first time I ever stood on the same side as Brittany, and it would not be the last. When Adam came home that night, I was sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. Not for drama, I just hadn't gotten up to turn on the light. He flipped the switch and saw my face, and he knew. He knew before I said a word. 4 years. He could read me too. "Brittany called," I said. And here is the thing I will never forgive. The thing that tells you everything about him. His first sentence was not, "I'm sorry." His first sentence was not even a lie about the baby. His first sentence, the very first words out of the mouth of the man my mother called one of the good ones, was, "What did she say to you?" Not, "What did I do?" What did she say? He was already managing the story, already figuring out which version I'd heard so he'd know which version to tell. What followed November was 3 weeks of the worst fighting of my life. And then, something worse than fighting, which was planning. Because once Brittany was 5 months pregnant, this stopped being about whether Adam had cheated. That was over. The question became what we were going to do about a baby that was coming, whether anyone in my kitchen wanted it or not. And Adam, I need you to hear how he handled it, because it's the part that should have ended us right there. He didn't want her to keep it. I know this because I heard him. One night in December, he was out in the garage, where he'd taken to making his work calls, and Nora had left her light-up sneakers out there, and I went to grab them. And the door from the kitchen to the garage is hollow and cheap, and I heard him before he heard me. He had his back to the door. He was pacing next to the recycling bins, and he was saying, in a low, hard voice I'd never heard him use on me, "You cannot do this to my family. Do you understand me? You can't do this to my family." His family. He was standing in the garage of the house he shared with me and our daughter, talking to the woman he'd gotten pregnant, calling us his family like a shield, and what he was begging her not to do, I figured it out in about 4 seconds, was have the baby. I stood there holding Nora's little sneakers, the ones with the soles that flash pink when you step, and I watched my fiancé try to talk a woman out of a child so that his life with me could stay clean. And the sickest part, the part I'm not proud of, is that some ugly, drowning piece of me was glad. For 1 second, I thought, good, make it go away. Make it so I never have to think about her again. I have to tell you that because if I only tell you the parts where I'm the good guy, then I'm doing the exact thing he did. She kept the baby. Of course she kept the baby. She was 38 years old, and she'd wanted to be a mother her whole life. And a married real estate agent with a finished basement did not get to vote on her body. Good for her. I mean that now. I did not mean it then. So there it was. A baby was coming in the spring, the same season as our wedding, which nobody missed the symmetry of. And Adam sat me down at the same kitchen table where he'd confessed the first time, and he asked me to marry him a third time. Not with a ring this time, with a plan. He said he would be a financial father, not a real one. He said he'd send money and stay out of the kid's life entirely if that's what it took to keep me. He said Brittany meant nothing. The baby was a mistake, and our family, me, him, Nora, was the only real thing he had. And I went back to Dr. Reyes. Alone, mostly, because Adam suddenly had a lot of deals closing. And Dr. Reyes, who I do not blame, who was only working with what I gave her, used the word rebuild again, and the word intentional, and asked me what I wanted my life to look like in 5 years. And I pictured Nora. I pictured her round-headed drawing of the three of us holding hands, which was stuck to our refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a slice of watermelon. 3 stick figures, me in the middle. I did not want to be the reason there were 2 figures and a gap. So I stayed. I told him I'd stay, I'd marry him, we'd figure out the baby like adults, set boundaries, keep it at the edges of our life. I chose the drawing on the fridge over the alarm in my own body. If you have ever talked yourself into staying somewhere your gut was screaming to leave, you already know exactly how reasonable it sounds from the inside. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like love. It sounds like everything except what it is, which is fear wearing love's coat. The baby was born 3 weeks ago. A boy. I found out the way I find out everything, apparently. Sideways, by accident, from a screen that wasn't meant for me. It was a Tuesday. I'd worked a long shift, a hard one, a delivery that scared all of us for about 90 seconds before it turned out fine. And I came home wrung out and quiet. Adam was in the shower. His phone was on the kitchen counter, face up for once, charging. And it lit up. I wasn't snooping. I want that on the record, for whatever it's worth, which is nothing. I was reaching past it for the coffee I'd left on the counter that morning, and it lit up, and I read it the way you read anything that flashes in front of your face. The text said, "He's here. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. You should come meet your son when you're ready. He has your hands." He has your hands. I stood in my own kitchen holding a cold cup of coffee from 12 hours earlier, and I read that sentence maybe 9 times. He has your hands. 3 weeks before my wedding, the man I was about to marry had a 3-day-old son with another woman, and she was texting him that the baby had his hands, gently, the way you'd text a partner, not a mistake. And then I did the thing I'd been so proud of not doing a year before. I picked up the phone and I read all of it. I'm not going to pretend I felt brave. I felt sick. My hands were doing a thing my patient's hands do, this fine shake, and I had to set the coffee down because I couldn't trust myself to hold it. I scrolled and scrolled, and the more I scrolled, the colder my skin got, Because the messages didn't start where he said they started. They didn't start at one drunk night a year ago. They went back further, and they ran straight through the whole 8 months we'd spent in Dr. Reyes's office with the sound machine, the whole rebuild, the cabin in Hocking Hills, the second proposal in the mud. There were nicknames. There was a "Good morning, you" with a sun emoji from a date when I could have told you exactly where Adam said he'd been because I'd packed his bag for that trip. And there was the Venmo. This is the detail that broke something in me that I don't think unbreaks. He'd been sending her money. $40 here, $60 there, every week like clockwork. And next to a chunk of the payments was a little emoji of a house. A tiny cartoon house, the kind a 6-year-old draws. He'd labeled the money he sent his pregnant girlfriend with the same little house, over and over, for months. Building something, paying into something. A whole second little house, funded $40 at a time, while I was picking out centerpieces for a wedding I thought was the only house we had. I didn't scream. I keep telling you I didn't scream, and I know it sounds like a brag, and it isn't. It's the opposite. Screaming would have been healthier. I walked down the hall to Nora's room, and I opened her door, and I stood there in the dark and watched my daughter sleep with her arm thrown over a stuffed otter, and I genuinely thought I was going to be sick on her carpet. I put my hand over my own mouth. The shower was still running. I could hear him in there, humming. The man was humming. I closed Nora's door, very quietly, the way you close a patient's door when they've finally fallen asleep. And I went and I sat back down at that kitchen table, and I put his phone back exactly where it had been, face up, charging, lit by nothing. Because somewhere between the bedroom and the kitchen, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to tell him what I knew. Not yet. For once in my life, I was going to be the one with the cleaned phone. That night, I lay next to him and I did not sleep 1 minute. I stared at the ceiling and I listened to him breathe. Easy, slow. The breathing of a man with nothing on his conscience. And I planned. Not revenge. I want to be careful with that word because I know how this sounds. I wasn't planning to ruin him. I was planning to find out the actual size of the thing I was standing in. Because I had spent a year being handed a teaspoon of truth and told it was the whole ocean, and I was done drinking what he poured me. In the morning, he made eggs. He always makes eggs after a good night's sleep. It's a tell I could have used years earlier if I'd been paying attention. He slid a plate in front of me and kissed the top of my head and asked if I'd looked at the seating chart, because his cousins from Dayton had finally RSVP'd and we needed to figure out the head table. 11 weeks to the wedding. He was talking about a head table. I stirred my coffee. I kept my voice exactly the way I keep it at work when the numbers are bad and the family is in the room. Light, even, nothing in it. "How's Brittany doing?" I said. I watched him over the rim of the cup, and for 1 second, less than a second, the kind of thing you'd miss if you hadn't spent a decade reading faces for a living, he froze. The fork stopped. Something behind his eyes did a fast little calculation. The same look a patient's husband gets when he's deciding which version of events to give the doctor. And then he said, "Who?" "Who?" He looked right at me, my fiancé, the father of my child, 3 weeks from our wedding, and he said the name of the mother of his newborn son back to me like it was a word in a language he didn't speak. Who? He was that smooth. He'd practiced that smooth. And I understood, sitting there with my eggs going cold, that there was no version of this where I'd been the only one. There were probably 100 mornings I'd sat at this table and asked him an ordinary question and gotten a small, frictionless lie I never even felt go by. I said, "Never mind, thought I saw her name on something." And I ate my eggs. I want you to understand what it cost me to eat those eggs. I have caught a baby with a cord around its neck and kept my voice calm for the mother. Eating those eggs was harder because now I knew two things. I knew the affair never stopped, and I knew he would lie to my face about a human child with my coffee in his hand and not even blink. The only thing I didn't know yet was who else had been standing in the lie with him. And that was the part that nearly took me apart, because it turned out the answer was somebody I'd have trusted with my own daughter's life. My sister, Dana. Here's how I found out. After the who, I started doing what I should have done a year before. Quietly, carefully. I didn't grab his phone again, he'd notice. I started somewhere he wouldn't think to guard, which was everyone around him. And the first person I called was Dana. Because Dana is my person. 2 years younger than me, the one who held my hair through my divorce from my first husband, the one who was supposed to be a bridesmaid, who'd already bought the dusty blue dress. I called Dana to cry, honestly. I called her to tell her what I'd found, because that's what I do. I call my sister when the floor falls out. And I could hear it. The second I said, Brittany had the baby and the affair never stopped. There was a pause on Dana's end. The wrong kind of pause. Not the shocked gasp pause. The caught pause. The pause of somebody recalculating how much you know. I know that pause now. I'd heard it from Brittany on the landline in November, and I'd heard it from Adam over the fork. And now, I was hearing it from my own sister. And my stomach just dropped straight through the floor. "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. She tried, for about 30 seconds, to act like she didn't know what I meant. And then she broke. Because Dana's a crier, always has been. And she told me everything in this awful rush. She'd known since the summer. Adam had told her. Adam had gone to my sister months ago and told her about Brittany and the pregnancy and asked her not to tell me. He'd framed it like he was protecting me. He said he was going to handle it, that telling me would blow up the wedding for nothing, that he had it under control, and Brittany was going to be quietly out of the picture, and there was no reason to put me through it. And Dana went along with it. I asked her why. I was crying by then, the ugly kind, and I asked her how she could sit across from me at my own bridal shower planning, how she could let me pick centerpieces, knowing. And she said the thing that I think I'll hear in my sleep for a long time. She said, "He helped me, Claire, with the car. I couldn't." The car. 6 months earlier, Dana's transmission had died, and she had no credit, and Adam had co-signed a loan for her new one. "Family helps family," he'd said. Very warm, very good guy. And I'd loved him a little extra for it. And he'd used it. He'd loaned my sister a car and bought her silence with it. And she'd let me walk toward a wedding with my eyes taped shut because she was scared he'd pull the rug on her financing if she crossed him. My own sister. For a used Honda. That was the moment something in me changed shape. Not the affair, not even the baby. It was that. Realizing he hadn't just lied to me, he'd built a little ring of people around me, paid in favors, whose job was to keep me from finding out. My sister. Probably others. He turned the people who loved me into a fence. And I'd been standing in the middle of the pen the whole time, picking out napkins. I didn't confront Adam that week. I know people watching this are screaming at their screen. "Leave! Just leave! Why are you still making him eggs?" Here's the honest answer. Because the second I blew it up, I lost control of the story. And I had spent a year being the last person to know my own life. I wanted to know all of it first, just once. So I kept smiling at the head table conversation, and I kept my receipts. And meanwhile, the families started to close in, because that's what families do when a wedding's 11 weeks out. They press. Adam's mother, Linda, called me almost every day now. Linda is one of those mothers who calls her 44-year-old son my baby without a trace of irony. And here's where it gets ugly. Because Linda knew. Of course Linda knew. Adam had told his mother about Brittany and the baby before he told me. And Linda's entire campaign, and it was a campaign, was to get me to accept the child quietly so the wedding could go forward and her son wouldn't lose his family over one mistake. She actually said that to me, on the phone, while I was folding Nora's laundry. I just don't want my son to lose his family over one mistake. And I said, very evenly, "Which family, Linda?" And there was a silence on the line that told me she'd never once thought of it that way. That in her mind, there was a real family, us, and a problem to be managed, them. A baby. A 3-week-old baby was a problem to be managed so the napkins could match. She started working the angle that I'd be cruel if I walked. That's the part that almost got me, I'll be honest. "There's an innocent baby in this," she'd say. "Are you really going to break up a family because of a baby that didn't ask to be born?" And she wasn't wrong about the baby. The baby didn't ask for any of this. But notice the trick. She'd taken the thing Adam did and turned it into a thing I'd be doing. He had the affair. I'd be the one breaking the family. He funded a second household in cartoon houses for a year. I'd be the cruel one. They do this. They hand you the bill for a meal you didn't order and look shocked when you won't pay. My own mother was worse, in a kinder way. My mother didn't know the affair never stopped. I hadn't told her the new part yet. And she was so deep into the wedding, so happy, that I couldn't make myself take it from her. She'd call to talk about the dress. "I steamed it again. It's perfect. You're going to faint when you see yourself." She'd put me on speaker while she described the buttons, and every time I'd think about the deposit we couldn't get back. The $4,000 sitting in a venue downtown. The church lady hemming. The cousins driving in from Dayton. And I'd feel the entire machine of a wedding bearing down on me like a truck I'd built myself and couldn't get out from under. That's the leverage nobody warns you about. By the time you find out, you're not deciding whether to marry him. You're deciding whether to detonate a venue, a dress, 2 families, a flower order, and your mother's face. The sunk cost isn't just money. It's everybody's hope. And they hand it to you to hold right when you most need your hands free. The thing finally cracked at my bridal shower. It was at my mother's house, a Sunday, maybe 9 weeks out. Finger sandwiches, a banner, that game where you have to guess how many Hershey's Kisses are in the jar. Linda was there. Dana was there, not meeting my eyes, wearing guilt like a coat she couldn't take off. And there was a woman named Carol, a friend of Linda's, one of those people who knows everyone's business and assumes everyone else does too. Carol came up to me by the dessert table, all warmth, and put her hand on my arm and said, "You are just a saint, you know that? Taking all this on. Linda told me about the situation with the baby, and I said to her, that girl is a saint. Most women would have run." The room didn't go silent like in a movie. That's the thing nobody tells you. The room kept going. The Hershey's Kiss game kept going. My mother, 8 feet away, was laughing at something. And I stood there, holding a little plate with a finger sandwich on it, while Linda's friend Carol told me, at my own bridal shower, that the entire extended circle of this family knew my fiancé had a baby with another woman, knew before I did, and had collectively decided I was a saint for swallowing it. They'd been admiring my grace. They'd been admiring a grace I didn't have because I hadn't known there was anything to be graceful about. I said, "Excuse me a second." I set the plate down. I walked through my mother's kitchen and out the side door, and I made it to my car in the driveway. And I got in, and I shut the door, and I threw up. In a Tupperware that was in my passenger seat from a potluck, because I couldn't make it back to the bathroom, and I wasn't going to do it on my mother's lawn at my own shower. That's break number 2, if you're keeping count. The first one was outside Nora's bedroom door. This one was a Tupperware in a Honda in my mother's driveway while a party I was the guest of honor at went on without me 40 feet away. I sat in that car for 20 minutes. I watched, through the window, my mother carry out the cake. A sheet cake with 2 little fondant rings on it. And I thought, every single person in that house knew more about my own engagement than I did. My fiancé, his mother's friend Carol, my sister. They'd built a whole quiet agreement that the wedding would happen and the baby would be managed and I'd be the saint who never asked questions. The only person who'd been kept in the dark about my life was me, and they'd all decided that was kindness. I fixed my face in the visor mirror. I'm good at that. Fixing my face is a job skill. And I walked back in, and I guessed the number of Hershey's Kisses, and I came within 4, and everyone cheered, and I won a little candle. I still have it. I don't know why I keep it, but sitting in that car, wiping my mouth, something finally went quiet and hard in me. Not louder, quieter. I stopped being the woman they could hand the bill to, and I made up my mind to do one thing before I did anything else. I was going to find Brittany, the actual woman, because she was the only other person in this whole thing who'd been lied to instead of doing the lying. And I had a feeling that if I compared notes with her, I'd finally see the whole shape of what he was. I was right. I just had no idea how right. I still had Brittany's number from the landline thing in November. She'd called my cell once after, and I'd never deleted it, the way you don't delete the number of a doctor's office you're dreading a call from. I texted her on a Wednesday, on my lunch break, sitting in the hospital cafeteria with a salad I wasn't eating. I kept it simple. "This is Claire, Adam's fiancé. I'm not angry at you. I think we've both been lied to, and I'd like to talk if you're willing." She wrote back in 4 minutes. I've been waiting a year for someone to say that to me. We met 2 days later at a Panera off Sawmill Road, which is the least dramatic place on earth to blow up 2 people's lives. She had the baby with her, 3 weeks old, in one of those car seat carriers, asleep under a muslin blanket with little foxes on it. I won't lie to you. Seeing him knocked the wind out of me. He was tiny and new and had a full head of dark hair, and he had nothing to do with anything. And I'm a labor and delivery nurse. My entire body is wired to go soft at a newborn. And here was the newborn that ended my life, sleeping in a Panera. I had to look away for a second and breathe. Brittany looked exhausted, the way only a woman 3 weeks postpartum looks, that hollowed-out, running-on-fumes look I've seen 1,000 times. And she looked scared of me. That got me somehow. She thought I was there to scream. Instead, I said, "I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Even the parts that make you look bad. And I'll do the same. Deal?" And we sat in a Panera for 2.5 hours, and we put the 2 halves of the story on the table between us. And what we built was so much worse than either of us had been carrying alone. Here's what she'd been told. According to Brittany, she and Adam never really stopped, same as I'd figured. But the part I didn't know was the story he'd told her about me. For the entire last year, Adam had been telling Brittany that he and I were basically roommates, that we'd been over for ages, that we only stayed together for Nora, that I was cold, that I'd checked out of the relationship, that he was just waiting for the right moment to leave so it wouldn't traumatize our daughter. He told her the wedding was something I was forcing for appearances, that his family expected it, that he'd go through with the ceremony to keep the peace, and then quietly transition out and be with her and the baby once the dust settled. He told her the dress, the venue, the head table, all of it was me clinging to a dead relationship, and he was just being kind by not humiliating me publicly before he left. To her, I was the bitter ex he was trapped with. To me, she was the one-night mistake he regretted. We were both the other woman. He'd written each of us as the obstacle in the other one's love story. He'd been running 2 completely separate movies on the same nights, and in both of them, he was the good man stuck doing the decent thing, and the woman across from him was the problem he was too kind to abandon. The Venmo with the little house emoji? She thought it was him quietly building their future, saving toward the place they'd get once he got free. $40 at a time, toward a life he had absolutely no intention of giving her. He'd told her the small amounts were because I watched the accounts, which, that detail almost made me laugh sitting there, because it was the one true thing in the whole con. I did watch the accounts. I just never thought to watch them for a second house. We compared dates. This is the part that turned my stomach all over again. She pulled out her phone and I pulled out mine, and we lined up the messages and the calendar like 2 nurses doing a chart review, and the timeline was obscene. The weekend he proposed to me again in the mud in Hocking Hills, down on one knee, the speech about the man he was becoming, he'd texted her that Sunday night. Almost done playing house. Hang in there. Almost done playing house. That was our re-engagement. The cabin I cried in was a thing he was enduring, and he'd told her so before the sheets were cold. I want to tell you I held it together at the Panera. I didn't. Not all the way. I put my hand over my mouth again. It's becoming my signature move, apparently. And Brittany, this woman I was supposed to hate, reached across the table and put her hand on my arm. Exactly the way Carol had at the shower. Except Carol was admiring a saint that didn't exist, and Brittany was just one tired woman recognizing another. She said, "I'm so sorry. I really thought you knew. I thought you were the one who didn't care." And I believed her. God help me, the person I ended up believing in this entire mess was her. Before we left, she told me one more thing, and it's the thing that set up everything that happened at the party. She said Adam had been pressuring her, since the birth, to bring the baby by to meet his family, but on his schedule, controlled, when I wasn't around. She said he kept putting her off and rescheduling, and she was done being hidden. She was done being the secret with a due date who'd become the secret with a stroller. She wanted the baby to have a family, out loud, in the daylight. And she said, half to herself, "He keeps saying not yet. There's never a good day." And this is the petty, gray, questionable thing I did, the thing I still turn over at night, I said, "I know a day." Nora's 6th birthday was that Saturday. But before I tell you about the party, I have to tell you what Adam did that Thursday, because it's the thing that took the last of my doubt away. The thing that turned, maybe I'm overreacting, into, no, I see exactly what you are. He must have felt the ground shifting. Men like Adam have an instinct for it. They can smell a deal going bad. He didn't know I'd met Brittany, But he knew I'd gone quiet, and my quiet was never the kind he liked. So Thursday night, he came home, and he was gentle, and he poured me a glass of wine I didn't ask for, and he sat down across from me at the table, and he said he wanted to talk about us, honestly. And then, very softly, wrapped in concern like a knife in a dish towel, he said this: "I just worry, if things ever got hard between us, about how it'd look for Nora. You work nights, the hospital owns your schedule. Any judge looks at a mom on 12-hour overnight shifts versus a dad with a flexible job and a house, and I'd never do that. You know I'd never do that. I'm just saying we should both be careful not to do anything we can't take back. For her." I want you to hear what that was, because I almost missed it under how kindly he said it. That was a threat. My own fiancé, 3 weeks after his son was born to another woman, sat across from me and reminded me that my job, the job where I catch other people's babies at 3 a.m, could be used to take my own daughter if I made him uncomfortable. He'd been cheating for a year, and his opening move, the second he sensed trouble, was to point at the one thing I love most and let me know he'd noticed it was load-bearing. I smiled and I said something about how, of course, we'd always put Nora first. And I refilled his wine, and inside, I went to a place I've only been a couple of times in my life. A flat, cold place with very good visibility. Because here's the thing about threatening a woman with her child. It doesn't make her careful. It tells her the gloves she thought were still on came off a long time ago, and she just hadn't been told. I called a lawyer Friday morning, on my break, in the same cafeteria where I'd texted Brittany. Not to be dramatic, to find out if a man could actually do what Adam had so gently suggested. The lawyer, a tired, kind woman named Patrice, who'd clearly heard this exact story 100 times, laughed, not unkindly, and said, "Honey, night shift nurses keep their kids every single day in this state. He's counting on you not knowing that." And she told me to write down the date and the exact words he'd used, because a man who threatens custody to control a partner tends to do it more than once, and judges have a long memory for it. So I wrote it down. Thursday. The wine I didn't ask for. Anything we can't take back. For her. I have it in a note on my phone, right above the screenshots of the cartoon house. And then it was Saturday. I need to be honest about what I did, because this is the part where a reasonable person watching might stop being on my side. And that's fair. I told a woman to bring her newborn to my daughter's 6th birthday party, a party Adam would be hosting in our backyard, in front of his mother, my mother, the neighbors, and 8 little girls in party dresses. I told myself I was giving Brittany the daylight she asked for. I told myself the baby deserved to not be a secret. But if I'm being truthful, there was a part of me that wanted Adam to have to stand in our backyard between his 2 families with nowhere left to run his 2 movies. I wanted him caught in the same room as both endings he'd written. That's not graceful. I know it isn't. I've had a lot of nights to decide whether I'm sorry, and I'm still not sure. I almost called it off. The night before, I sat on the edge of Nora's bed while she slept, and I almost texted Brittany to say, "Don't come. Not like this. Not at a kid's party." I drafted it. I deleted it. Because every time I got close to protecting Adam from the consequence, I'd remember the head table, the who, the cartoon house, my sister and the car, and I'd think, when has anyone protected me from a single thing? When did anyone decide I was too fragile for the truth? They decided I was strong enough to be lied to for a year. Fine. Then I'm strong enough for a Saturday. So Saturday came. We had the whole thing in the backyard. A bounce house. Adam rented a bounce house, the big one, because Adam always goes overboard when there's an audience to be the good dad in front of. 8 little girls, a folding table with a sheet cake, a different one this time, princesses, Nora's pick. My mother was there in a sundress, so happy, refilling the lemonade. Linda was there, holding court by the patio. Dana came and stood at the edge of everything like she wasn't sure she was allowed, which she wasn't, but it was Nora's birthday, and I wasn't going to make my niece's mother leave.
Adam was in full performance. Apron, tongs, who wants a hot dog?
The dad of the year. He had no idea. He kissed me on the cheek when I came out with the juice boxes and said, "Best mom in the world." And I smiled and said, "Watch the grill," and went back inside. At about 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen. I could have let Adam get it. I didn't. I walked to the front door and I opened it. And there was Brittany, in a clean shirt, her hair done, looking terrified and brave at the same time, with the baby, Theo, she'd named him Theo, in the fox blanket car seat over her arm. And behind her, parked at the curb, was her little gray sedan, with the door still open like she wasn't sure she'd stay. She looked at me and she said, "I almost didn't come." And I said, "I know, me too." And for a second, the two of us just stood there in my doorway, 2 women holding the same man's wreckage. And I swear there was more honesty in that doorway than in the entire year behind me. Then Adam came around the side of the house, still holding the grill tongs because someone had told him there was someone at the door. I will remember his face for the rest of my life. Not because it crumbled, because for 1 second, it tried to run both movies at once and couldn't. I watched him look at Brittany on the porch and look at me holding the door and look back at the backyard where his mother and my mother and 8 children were. And I watched the machine behind his eyes search for the version of the story that got him out of this. And there wasn't one. For the first time in a year, there was no separate room to put me in, no separate room to put her in. We were all in the same doorway. The 2 movies hit each other and stopped. He said, "What is this?" Not a question. Flat. And then, fast, low to me. "What did you do?" There it was again. Not, "What did I do?" What did you do? Even then, even standing in front of the woman in the sun he'd hidden, his first instinct was that I was the problem in the room. I didn't yell. I want that on the record because I think it's the only thing I did right that day. I said, quietly so the kids couldn't hear, "Brittany wanted Theo to meet his family. You kept saying there was never a good day, so I picked one." And Brittany, God, Brittany, she looked at Adam and she said the thing that ended it. The thing that made the whole con fall down in the front yard like a tent with the poles pulled out. She said, "You told me she moved out in March. You said you 2 were done. You said the wedding was a formality." And she pulled out her phone, right there on the porch, and she held it up. And there were his texts, months of them, in the daylight, telling her I was gone, telling her it was almost over, telling her to hang in there. And I pulled out mine, and I held up the cartoon house, the Venmo, the almost done playing house from the night of the cabin. We stood on the porch and held up our phones like 2 people comparing x-rays of the same broken bone. And Adam looked from one screen to the other, and I watched it land. The exact moment a person realizes both halves of their lie are now standing on the same square of concrete and can read each other. He didn't apologize. I keep waiting in my memory for him to apologize, and he never does, because he didn't. What he did was turn around and walk into the backyard, hand the grill tongs to a confused neighbor, and disappear into the garage. The garage, where he made his calls. He shut the door and he did not come out. Not when his mother started asking what was wrong. Not when my mother followed me into the kitchen with her hand on her chest. Not when the bounce house kept roaring in the yard with 8 kids inside it who had no idea anything had happened at all.
So I did the only thing that made sense to me, which probably tells you everything about how my brain is wired. I brought Brittany inside. I sat her down at my kitchen table, the same table, always the same table, and I cut her a slice of Nora's princess cake. And I held the baby while she ate, because she hadn't eaten. You can always tell. And I am a labor and delivery nurse, and there was a hungry postpartum woman in my kitchen. And some reflexes don't care whose life is ending. And my mother stood in the doorway with her hand still on her chest, looking at the 3 of us, me, the other woman, and the baby, trying to understand the shape of what she was seeing. And out in the yard, the bounce house roared, and my daughter turned 6, and her father stayed in the garage with the door shut. I called off the wedding that night, after the last little girl got picked up and Nora was asleep, still in her party dress because I didn't have it in me to fight her into pajamas. I didn't do it in a big scene. I went out to the garage where Adam was sitting in his car in the dark, not driving anywhere, just sitting, the way I'd sat in mine at the shower. And I opened the door and I said, "It's off. The wedding's off. You can tell your mother or I will." And he looked up at me, and the first thing he said, the very first thing, was, "You ambushed me at our daughter's birthday." And he wasn't entirely wrong. That's the part I have to live with. He'd done a year of damage, and I'd done one cruel Saturday. And a cruel Saturday is still cruel even when it's aimed at someone who earned it. I told him the truth, which was, "Yeah, maybe I did. You had 100 better days to tell me yourself, and you used every one of them to lie. So I picked the day. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not the one who needs a garage to hide in." Then I went inside and I started the part nobody warns you about, which is the cleanup. Because calling off a wedding 11 weeks out isn't a moment. It's a job. I had to call the venue. $4,000. Gone. Non-refundable. And you know what? I didn't even argue. I just let it go. The cheapest $4,000 I've ever spent. I had to call my mother the next morning and tell her the part I'd been protecting her from. The whole thing. The affair that never stopped, and the baby, and Dana, and the car. And listen to her cry. And then listen to her get quiet. And then hear her say, "I have to take the dress back to the woman at church." That sentence did something to me that the affair didn't. My mother, having to walk a white dress back into a church basement and explain. The hem job, the buttons she loved. The family split exactly the way you'd expect. Linda called me a heartless woman who destroyed her son over a mistake and turned a child's birthday into a stunt. She's not entirely wrong about the stunt, and I've stopped arguing with her about it because the people who call it a stunt are always the people who knew and said nothing. My mother, once she got past the dress, became a wall in front of me. She drove over that first week and just cleaned my kitchen for 3 hours without talking, which is how my mother says I love you and I'm furious for you at the same time. Dana texts me every few days. I haven't answered most of them. I don't know if I'm going to. She didn't cheat on me, she's right about that. She said it in one of the texts. I didn't do the thing he did. No. She just took a car to help him do it. I'm not ready to decide what that costs yet. Adam still thinks there's a version of this where I take him back. He really does. He's left me voicemails. Long ones. At first angry, then sad, then strategic. You can hear him cycling through the sales playbook trying to find the close that works. The one I keep, the one I haven't deleted because I think I need it on the days I waver, is the one where he said, "You're a nurse, Claire. You of all people should understand that people make mistakes. You see people on their worst day, and you don't judge them. Why can't you do that for me?" And the thing is, he's right that I don't judge people on their worst day. I've held the hand of a woman whose baby didn't make it, and I've held the hand of a woman lying about whose baby it was, and I treated them the same, because that's the job. But a worse day is a thing that happens to you. What Adam did wasn't a worse day. It was a best effort, sustained for a year, with a budget and a schedule and a fence of people he built around me out of my own family. That's not a mistake. A mistake is a thing you trip over. He didn't trip. He built. Here's where I am now. The wedding's gone, the dress went back, I kept the little candle I won at the shower, the Hershey's Kiss one, and I don't know why, and I've stopped asking myself. Nora is okay. She's 6, she had a great birthday, she has no idea, and I am going to keep it that way for as long as I possibly can, which is its own kind of exhausting, smiling at her father at custody handoffs like he's just a man I used to know. We're doing it through a mediator. He wanted to talk boundaries with Brittany and a co-parenting framework, like the affair was a merger and we just needed to align on the org chart. I told the mediator I had no boundaries to discuss with Brittany because Brittany and I are fine. That's the part that surprises everyone. Brittany and I are fine. We're not friends exactly. That word's too clean for whatever this is. But she texts me a picture of Theo sometimes, and I texted her the name of a good pediatrician on the east side, the one I'd send anybody to. And once, she called me at 11 at night because the baby had a fever of 101, and she was alone and scared and didn't know whether to go in. And I talked her through it, like I'd talk anybody through it. And afterward, she said, "I don't have anybody else who knows this stuff." And I said, "I know. Me neither, lately." 2 women he lied to in opposite directions, splitting the truth between us. Because it turned out, we were the only 2 people in the whole mess who'd never lied to each other. I think about the doorway a lot. The moment Brittany and I stood there before Adam came around the house. 2 strangers who were supposed to be enemies, both holding the same wreckage, both having almost not come. That's the only clean thing I got out of any of it. Not justice, not even closure, whatever that's supposed to be. Just that one true doorway in a year of lies. So, was I a saint the way Carol thought? No. I cut a slice of cake for the woman my fiancé cheated with, while my mother stood there with her hand on her chest. Was I cruel, the way Linda says, for picking my daughter's birthday? Maybe. Probably. I've decided I can hold both, that I did one hard, questionable thing inside a thing that was done to me for a year, and that I'm allowed to not be sure I did it right and still know I had to do something. People keep asking me if I regret it. They mean the party, the stunt. And here's the honest answer, the one I keep coming back to at 3 in the morning when the house is quiet and Nora's asleep and I can hear the refrigerator running with that watermelon magnet still on it, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures with a gap in it now. I don't regret the day I picked. I regret every day before it that I let somebody else pick for me. I spent a year being the last to know my own life, surrounded by people who decided I was strong enough to lie to, but too weak to tell. I'm done with that. I'd rather be the woman who threw up in a Tupperware and cut the cake and blew up her own backyard than go back to being the saint who never asked a single question. The wedding would have been this spring. The venue downtown, the big windows. I drove past it last week on my way home from a shift. On purpose, I think, to see if it would hurt. There was another couple out front taking pictures, a girl in a white dress laughing at something, a guy fixing his tie. And I felt nothing sharp, just a small, tired hope that she's asking him better questions than I asked mine. That's it. That's the whole thing. My fiancé called it a one-time mistake, and 3 weeks before our wedding, the mistake was born with his hands. And I found out from a phone that lit up while he was humming in the shower. I didn't get a wedding. I got a doorway and a Tupperware and a slice of princess cake on a paper plate. And the truth? Finally, all of it, mine to hold. And honestly, after the year I'd had, the truth was the better gift. My read is that the worst part was not only the affair, it was the whole circle asking her to protect a wedding after the truth had already broken the family inside it. Tell me if the birthday confrontation crossed a line, or if it was the only honest room left. Hit like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.